communion, whatever you want to call it. Um,
Mm.
and I think that that's a big thing. I do want to like kind of
Yeah.
discuss the fact that like communing with our higher selves is definitely very different for each person. People have like visuals, people have third eye visuals. Like there's different types of visuals, or there's different types of telepathy, clairaudience. Um, when we say our higher self, I guess what we should do first is, my biggest question is, with this episode, do we want to just encompass like just the higher self, or are we encompassing all beings that we might commune with?
Well, I
Um,
guess that's kind of where that question was very lazily aimed, was kind of like, what is the higher self
higher
in a
self.
connection with that ultimate source connection that we're kind of talking about? Where does that higher self in lie there? And I think that exactly what you're asking is the right question. It's like, it's going to be different for every single person, because it depends who you maybe spend the most time with, in that sense, as far as who's making you feel that trust and that faith. Is it someone that you recognize as a guide team member, or is that your higher self? And is there a place where those things converge? Is my kind of big, gaping, probably will never have an answer for that fully question. Because I think you touched on some really important points there as well in what you just said. Number one being the fear. Because fear, I mean, like, everything is a distortion of love, right? Any thought. But I feel like with the way that I'm able to know when I'm dealing with my higher self, or even a guide team member, or if they're, working together, is kind of that absence of fear. Like, that never comes with that vibration of fear. There's never that attached to those messages or those interactions or those, visions or whatever it is. And the other thing is that nurturing aspect, that reparenting aspect that you mentioned. And I think those go hand in hand as well. In that, with that nurturing, with that reparenting, it's very much like that mother bear aspect in a sense, but without the fear. Without the fear there. It's like, how would someone lead you through life if they were not worried about what was going to happen to you, in a way that was like, nothing's bad is going to happen. Whatever happens is going to be for your best good. I know that. So here's how I'm going to lead you through. And it's really interesting to see where those intertwine. Does that intertwine in the guide team and everything else?
For me, I do think that you can have fear when communing with your higher self. I think that early on, that's one of our biggest fears. We were so afraid of our power. You know what I mean? We have so many of
Mm-hmm.
us, and so many, whether it's my clients, my sponsees, whoever it is, like they're afraid of stepping into their power. So they are afraid of, communing with their higher self, or their higher self trying to commune with them provokes some sort of fear of
Mm.
change, fear of sacrifice, fear of letting go, fear of, a different lifestyle, or, just the whole reality changing, your entire life narrative changing. Because the
Yeah.
more that you commune with your higher self, the more that your narrative changes, or it should, in most cases. Um, and I think that that kind of,
That can evoke fear, but I don't necessarily think that the message that's coming from that higher thing carries fear. Does that make sense? Like a difference there?
I think it just depends on how you meet it. You know what I mean? Like what
Mm.
vibration, like how you meet it, because bringing fear, I don't think that anything that it's intending to do is necessarily, but it could be, because we have to face our fears. We have to face that dark shadow. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like there's good and there's no good, there's no bad, there's no light, there's no dark. So therefore, fear really isn't a bad thing. You know what I mean? Especially from our higher self, it's a good thing. So yeah, I do believe that our higher self very much brings us fear. I
Mm.
think it brings us fear to battle it. I think that it brings everything, because, and then that takes, the other point that I wanted to make was, for me, encompassing and understanding the fact that I am, the all and a creator, and therefore these other entities and these other beings can be considered part of my higher self.
Mm.
But where I am right now, in the work that I'm doing right now, the beings are outside of me. You know what I mean? Like they aren't my higher self. They aid my higher self. They work with my higher self, but they aren't my higher self. Um and I think that that's where I like that's for me but I can see different time points when I feel so connected and I feel 100% part of the all in the source, and that in that understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, oh, you are me and I am you. So you are my higher self. You know what I mean? Like you are like communing with my higher self, my higher self's communing with me. So therefore it is the same concept. I think it's that paradox.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. I guess, yeah, I guess for me, the thing I'm struggling with is that don't, I feel like those higher existences, you know, exist in a different plane. And I don't necessarily know that fear is a paradigm that exists there. So I'm just not sure how, when something is speaking from that different plane, how whatever words or vibration that it carries can even carry fear with it. I certainly see, and this is where I love what you just said, because it's making me think about this so much more deeply. And I definitely see where a lot of, like, you're 100% right, a lot of what comes from that higher self evokes fear in us, as it should, because we're living in this reality where making those huge changes, as you say, that's like the scariest thing. Or the scariest thing is, perhaps even beyond that, like just looking inward, looking at yourself truthfully, 100% radical acceptance, looking at those shadows, stepping into those and saying, who am I really? And so definitely it's going to bring you fear, for sure. So I guess what's interesting to me is, where does that I guess we create that vibration in a sense from what is offered to us. We're offered kind of, here's a platter, here's your options, here's maybe the best option, or here's what I would suggest that you do next. And maybe, a good point from there is that we should maybe be leaning towards the fear, in that if we can feel the love from this voice, or we can feel that loving vibration from that suggestion, maybe the fear is a signal that it maybe is something that we should be doing, that we shouldn't be running away from that we should be leaning into that suggestion more than, taking that as like, ooh, that scares me, I shouldn't do that. When it comes from that loving place, that benevolent place, maybe that's when we should be seeing that fear as a really positive indication of something